were real.
Right there, that's a man who's spent decades walking through rooms most people will never even see. Not just entering them, but understanding them. Watching, listening, learning what's said out loud and what's never supposed to be said at all. And now, Denzel Washington is speaking in a way that feels different. Not louder, not reckless, just clearer. Like someone who's reached a point where silence doesn't make sense anymore.
It's a very strange place, Hollywood. But it's an odd place. And you imagine all these horror stories there that you think, boy, it seems as if I'm being sacrificed over here. No, that couldn't be true. And then you realize that it is true.
Because here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Success in Hollywood was never just about talent. It wasn't just about hard work either. And it definitely wasn't just luck. There's always been another layer to it. A layer people feel but can't always explain. The pressure to fit into a certain mold, the quiet expectations, the subtle compromises that don't show up in interviews or award speeches. And what Denzel has been hinting at in his own calm, grounded way is that the real cost of success isn't always visible.
And I think there's going to need to be a house cleaning, and it's going to have to come back to some sort of equilibrium.
But here's the twist. He's not speaking from bitterness. He's speaking from experience. And that's what makes this story hit differently. Because when someone who made it, someone who stayed respected, stayed consistent, stayed grounded for decades, starts pulling back the curtain even slightly, you have to ask yourself, what did he see? And what did he refuse to become?
I think it's a lot of the people that get in it. And, institutions good or as bad as the people in it running it,
Denzel Washington didn't come from privilege. He didn't walk into Hollywood with connections or a safety net. He came from discipline, structure, faith, a strong foundation that shaped the way he moved through life long before cameras were ever pointed at him. Born in Mount Vernon, New York, raised by a mother who worked hard to keep him focused and away from trouble, Denzel wasn't always the man people see today. He said it himself. He could have gone down a completely different path, but something shifted. Guidance, mentorship, and eventually, purpose. Acting wasn't just a career for him. It became a calling, something deeper than fame.
He floated in, sideways, through a crowd of people. He was wearing black. And it was like one of those old vampire movies where they don't walk, but they glide. And he was a dancer, so he has he's very, graceful.
Yeah.
And he moved sideways and he just sat down in a chair next to me. And it kind of frightened me.
And when he stepped into Hollywood, he didn't come in trying to play the game. He came in trying to do the work. That's why his rise felt different. Film after film, role after role, he built a reputation not just as a great actor, but as a man with standards, a man who didn't bend easily, a man who carried himself with a kind of quiet authority that couldn't be manufactured. But here's what people don't realize. That kind of integrity doesn't always fit comfortably in an industry built on perception.
I told the police. In fact, if anybody wants to go back to 1993 when I was interviewed by the Santa Barbara Police Department, I sat there and I gave them the names. They're on record.
Because Hollywood, at its highest levels, isn't just about performance. It's about influence. It's about relationships. It's about knowing when to speak and when to stay quiet. And Denzel, from early on, seemed to understand that balance better than most. But understanding something doesn't mean you agree with it. And that's where things start to get complicated. Because over the years, in interviews, speeches, and quiet moments that didn't always make headlines, Denzel would say things that made people pause. Not dramatic accusations, not loud confrontations, just observations about values, about identity, about what people are asked to sacrifice without even realizing it.
I formed a bunch of opinions about the town and about the people in it that were like, surely that couldn't be, because a whole place can't be like, Weird Town, where the stranger wanders in and all the people are in the bar and they all shut up when he looks at them. And They tell you don't go into the house on the hill.
And slowly, piece by piece, a bigger picture started forming. One that wasn't about one person or one incident, but about a system, a culture, a way of operating that rewards certain choices and quietly punishes others. And Denzel chose his path carefully, but that doesn't mean the pressure wasn't there. It just means he didn't let it change him.
Sir, get out of the car, please. Turn the car off.
What do you want?
I'm down, sir.
Mr. What the do you want?
Please step out of the car, Mr. Gibson.
Malibu PD, sir.
What the are you filming? Tell me something.
Now, here's where the story takes a turn, because what nobody expects is how subtle it all really is. There's no moment where someone sits you down and says, "This is the price of success." It doesn't work like that. It's quieter, more gradual. You start getting opportunities, but they come with expectations, not written down, not spoken directly, just understood. The roles you take, the people you align with, the things you promote, the things you stay silent about. And over time, those choices start shaping not just your career.
I feel like I'm being stripped down and prepared for something else. Now that's maybe very personal, but I feel like the Almighty's preparing me to do something big.
But your identity. Denzel has spoken before about the importance of knowing who you are before the world tells you who to be. And that statement hits harder when you realize where he's saying it from. Because Hollywood has a way of reshaping people, not overnight, but slowly, piece by piece, until one day you look in the mirror and don't fully recognize the person staring back.
I don't know where she starts talking. Turns out she's not 25, not even 20. This girl is 14 years old to Mateo.
But here's the part most people miss. That transformation doesn't always feel like a loss at first. It feels like progress, like success, like finally making it. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Because by the time you realize what you've traded, you're already deep inside the system. And walking away isn't easy. Now think about Denzel again. Decades in the industry, top-tier success, respect across every level. And yet, he never fully blended into that machine. He stayed grounded, spiritual, disciplined. And that wasn't by accident. That was a decision, a constant one. Because staying yourself in a place designed to reshape you is a fight most people don't even realize is happening.
I asked them about that one particular part where everybody's talking, and they all cried out Epstein Island. And I went, oh, okay. Now I understand what we're up against.
And here's the twist. The more successful you become, the harder that fight gets. Because now there's more at stake, more eyes on you, more pressure to maintain your position, more expectations to play along. And this is where Denzel's words start to feel heavier, because he's not just talking about the beginning of the journey. He's talking about what happens when you reach the top, when you're in rooms where decisions are made, when you see how influence really works, when you understand that talent alone doesn't explain everything.
Mr. Epstein, how long have you been attracted to underage minor females?
Are you kidding?
And that's when the question changes. It's no longer, can you make it? It becomes, what are you willing to become to stay there? And for Denzel, that answer always had a limit. But not everyone sets that boundary. And that's where the real story lives.
Man has got a spiritual malady for a start. I mean, the scary thing is that I think a lot of people think.
What nobody expected was how much it weighs on a person. Because from the outside, it looks like success. Awards, fame, recognition, influence. But inside, there's a different reality, a constant awareness, a constant tension between staying true to yourself and navigating a system that doesn't always reward that. Denzel has spoken openly about faith, about accountability, about purpose beyond fame. And those aren't just talking points, they're anchors. Because without something grounding you, something real, it's easy to drift, easy to adapt, easy to slowly become what the environment expects.
Why is it all on me? Why is it if I don't release the names in the next 2 months, 6 months, or a year, I'm the bad guy? I'm the victim here. I'm the one who's been abused. I'm the one who's trying to come forward and do something about it.
But
Hold on, please, I'm sorry. There are thousands of people out there, Matt, who have this information.
And that's the emotional cost people don't see. The internal battle, the quiet decisions, the moments where you choose integrity, even when it might cost you something. And over time, those choices shape everything: your relationships, your peace of mind, your legacy. For Denzel, that meant protecting his family, protecting his name, protecting his values. But it also meant walking a different path than many around him. Not louder, not flashier, just more intentional. And that kind of path can feel isolating.
Make sure that you don't get out of line too much. It's a high wire act.
Because not everyone understands it, not everyone respects it. But in the end, it's the only way to look back at your life and know you didn't lose yourself along the way. And maybe that's the real message in all of this. Not a scandal, not a headline, but a warning, a reminder that success without identity comes at a cost, that environments, no matter how glamorous, can shape you in ways you don't even notice at first, and that the strongest people aren't the ones who rise the fastest, they're the ones who stay grounded the longest.
I get up every day and I realize I'm not in control of this whole thing. And no matter what happens, I just ask for the grace to be able to deal with it.
Denzel Washington didn't just survive Hollywood, he navigated it on his terms, with boundaries, with awareness, with a clear understanding that not everything offered needs to be accepted. And maybe that's what people are finally starting to understand, that the real power isn't in fame, it's in control. Control over who you are, what you stand for, and what you refuse to become. Because in the end, the spotlight fades, the applause quiets down, but the person you became along the way, that stays with you. So the real question isn't just about Hollywood, it's about anyone chasing success in any field. When the opportunities come, when the pressure builds, when the expectations start closing in, will you recognize the moment where you have to choose? And when that moment comes, will you still know who you are? Or will you realize too late that somewhere along the way you traded something you can't get back? That's the part nobody talks about, but maybe that's the part that matters most. Because here's the part that stays with you long after the cameras stop rolling. It's not the roles, it's not the awards, it's not even the legacy people talk about in interviews and documentaries. It's the decisions, the quiet ones, the ones nobody claps for, the ones nobody even knows you made. Denzel Washington understood that early, or maybe he learned it the hard way, watching others lose themselves piece by piece, watching careers rise fast and then collapse just as quickly, watching people trade everything for a seat at the table, only to realize later that the seat came with chains. And here's what makes his story different. He never chased the table. He built his own. That's why you don't hear scandals tied to his name the way you do with others at that level. That's why his reputation stayed solid, while so many around him faced controversy, exposure, or quiet disappearance from the spotlight. It wasn't luck. It was discipline. It was boundaries. And most importantly, it was awareness. Because once you see how a system works, you have two choices. You either play along or you move differently. And Denzel chose to move differently. But that choice isn't easy, because when you don't play the game the way it's expected, you don't just stand out, you become unpredictable. And in an environment built on control, unpredictability makes people uncomfortable. That's where the real tension begins. Not loud, not dramatic, but present. You might not get certain roles. You might not get invited into certain circles. You might feel doors closing quietly, without explanation. And that's the unspoken consequence. Not punishment in the obvious sense, but distance, subtle separation from the inner layers of influence. And yet, Denzel stayed, not to conform, but to exist without losing himself. And that's a different kind of strength. Because it's easy to walk away completely, and it's easy to fully give in. But staying in the middle, staying true while surrounded by pressure, that requires something deeper, something most people don't have the patience or the clarity to maintain. And maybe that's why his words now carry so much weight, because they're not coming from someone who got pushed out. They're coming from someone who stayed and still didn't fold. Think about that. Decades in one of the most powerful industries in the world, access to every level, exposure to every kind of influence, and still, he speaks about faith. Still, he talks about purpose. Still, he warns about losing your soul chasing success. That's not random. That's someone who saw enough to know what's at stake. And here's the part that should make you pause. He doesn't say everything. He doesn't need to, because sometimes what a person doesn't say tells you just as much as what they do. The pauses, the careful wording, the way he circles around certain ideas instead of naming them directly. That's not hesitation, that's experience. That's someone who understands exactly how far you can go without triggering consequences most people will never even see coming. But even within those limits, the message is clear. There is a cost, not always visible, not always immediate, but real. And the higher you climb, the higher that cost becomes. So when Denzel talks about staying grounded, about putting God first, about not chasing fame for its own sake, he's not just giving advice. He's giving a warning disguised as wisdom, because he knows not everyone who enters that world comes out the same. Some lose their identity, some lose their peace, some lose everything they thought they were building. And by the time they realize it, it's already too late. But here's where this story turns into something bigger than Hollywood, because this isn't just about actors or celebrities or fame. It's about any system where success is tied to compromise, any environment where the pressure to fit in slowly pushes you away from who you really are. It could be corporate, it could be social circles, it could be anywhere. The pattern is the same. The only thing that changes is the setting. And that's why Denzel's story matters. Because it forces you to ask yourself a question most people avoid. What would you do if the opportunity was right in front of you? If the reward was everything you ever wanted, but the cost was something you couldn't see right away? Would you recognize it? Would you question it? Or would you tell yourself it's just how things work and move forward anyway? That's how it starts. Not with a big decision, but with a small one, then another, until one day you realize you've gone further than you ever planned to, and turning back feels impossible. But Denzel didn't go down that path. He drew a line, over and over again, in ways people may never fully understand. And because of that, he didn't just build a career, he built a life he could stand on, a name that didn't need defending, a legacy that isn't built on mystery, but on consistency. And maybe that's why, even now, people listen when he speaks, not because he's loud, because he's real. And in a world full of performance, real is rare. So the next time you see someone at the top, don't just ask how they got there, ask what they gave up to stay there, because that's the part nobody puts in the headlines. And maybe that's the part that matters the most. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think success always comes with a hidden cost? Or do you believe it's possible to reach the top without losing yourself along the way? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this made you see things a little differently, make sure you like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because some stories don't end here. They're just getting started.